Hey guys, I'm Tiffany.
I'm Stephanie.
And we're Sisters of the South, back with another video for you today. But before we get started, we just want to remind everyone to please hit that subscribe button. Also, hit that like button if you like our videos. And please remember to hit the notification bell so you know when we've dropped another video. And with that being said, we just want to give a little shout out to our friends over at SoFly. SoFly.
So small.
Not no more.
Not no more. Yeah.
And I'm going to let Stephanie tell you about them now.
SoFly is a family-owned business here in the Houston, Texas area, and they specialize in embroidery and in laser work. So what they do is they will take an accessory such as a cap, a hoodie, a t-shirt, a purse, even a cap. And let me show you what they did for us.
We got some stuff made.
We got some stuff, guys. And what they do is they'll specialize it to your needs. They'll put your logo, an emoji, your name, initials, anything like that. And they've been working on some stuff for us for CrimeCon in Denver in September. So we want to show you some of the beautiful work that they've done for us. This cap's actually for my niece, and she wanted purple for Sisters of the South. So we thought that was excellent, and the coloring is beautiful.
Yes.
We're also going to show you our CrimeCon caps, and they are metallic threaded, and they put our names on them, and they specialized it just for us.
Yeah.
They also did,
and it's beautiful. Thank you, guys.
It's so beautiful, but they also did a bag. If you remember, a few shows back, we got the idea that we needed a bag. So here we are. This is our CrimeCon bag. So when you see us at CrimeCon, we will be carrying SoFly's work on us. So reach out
the whole time.
The whole time. The whole time. So we know that you'll be happy. There's no doubt about that. But we're going to show you a little video of how they do what they do. So here we go.
All right, guys, we hope you like that video. Go check them out. Let them know we sent you. And if you do buy something, send us some pictures because we want to see it all.
Oh, yeah. We love to see the different designs that they come up with and the colors. It keeps us giving us ideas on how to get our next stuff done. So, yeah, send us a picture. We'd love to see it. Well, today we're going to talk about the meanest man in Texas.
All right, I'm ready.
Yeah, it's a good story. My husband and I watched a movie about this, and I got real curious about the details. Movies don't always have details, and so I did a little research, and it also was fitting because on one of our last videos for Terry Lynn Winchell, I was pretty harsh on a prisoner by the name of Michael Morales, although I still stand by what I said about Morales. Due to his unwillingness to admit fault for the slaying, I want to clarify that I do believe prisoners can change. With that being said, how much humility does that person have after becoming a Christian? And that's based on how they act, and do they really have compassion in what they actually did? So that's just what I go by. So my question is, are they hiding behind the cross in the Bible? And that's just my biggest question. And so I kind of wanted to redeem myself a little bit by putting this out there, bringing the story to the forefront. It's actually a story about someone who spent enough time in prison and had done some really bad things. He had a Christian upbringing, that he had some guidelines to follow. He completely turned his back on those beliefs, but then turned back to God. And I think it's very inspiring. And I think that what this person did in the end is just beautiful. So we're going to talk today about Clyde Vernon Thompson. He was born in 1911 in Guymon, Oklahoma. He was raised in a Christian home. Thompson's first and middle names came from towns in Texas, which I thought was really cool. Number one, he's from Oklahoma. And we know the rivalry between Oklahoma and Texas. So even they think Texas is cool, okay?
Well, because it's the best. And didn't you do that with two of your kids? Aren't they named after towns in Texas?
Yes, two of my three children, their names were picked off of the Texas map. So with that, I completely agree. Texas has some of the coolest names, and you could name a plethora of children if you wanted to, just off of the Texas map. So I think that was really cool. So he stopped attending school after the fourth grade.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, you
To
got to
work.
think, this was back in the 20s going into the 30s by the time he's in high school. And back then, a lot of people didn't finish.
No, they had to work.
Yeah, they didn't finish through the 12th. They would usually quit school around the 8th grade, sometimes younger than that. Yeah, they had to be out in the fields, And this was attributed to not starting his formal education until age 8 and frequent moves of his family. His father was a Bible salesman and a preacher, but Clyde never had much use for church. When he was old enough to stay home alone, he began refusing to attend services. Most Sundays, while his family was worshiping, Clyde was out hunting. And I'm going to be honest, guys. I was raised in church. Tiff was raised in church. But as I get older, I'm a hunter. And to me, the number one way I feel close to God is out in nature. And Clyde might not have realized this at that young age, but he probably was very spiritual while he was out in the woods. And it was his church, so to speak. So I kind of related to that. So one Sunday evening, Clyde was doing just that. He was with a couple of friends of his, two brothers, ages 18 and 13. Clyde was only 17 at the time. They borrowed the pistol and shotgun of the brother's father without his knowledge and set out. As it happens, they ran into a couple of men who had had trouble with the older brother and their father. Some words were exchanged. The argument escalated to a fight. When the two men tried to use a powder horn and tree limbs as weapons, Clyde pulled the pistol and shot both of them dead. Clyde was sentenced to death at the electric chair in 1931. At only 19 years old, he was the youngest person ever to be placed on death row in Huntsville at the time.
Wow.
He had never obeyed the gospel, but he overheard Brother P.D. Wilmoth preaching on a radio in prison. Clyde listened and sent for him to come and baptize him, and he did. There in the Walls unit at Huntsville only 6 days before he was to be executed. And I think that this was a pivotal moment, not only for Clyde, but for Clyde's father, because Clyde had always stayed in trouble, and he also liked to fight. And this was a big concern of his dad's. And so I think that unfortunately he had to be in prison to decide he wanted to be baptized. And he was at that point facing death row. I'm sure it brought his father some peace that his son was finally becoming baptized.
Absolutely.
Yeah. In the meantime, the trial of his other adult accomplices took place. The young man came for money and was able to hire a good lawyer. He received a 5-year suspended sentence. The governor could not see justice in sending one man to die when two others were equally guilty. So Clyde's sentence was commuted mere hours before his execution, not to 5 years. So, in other words, Clyde, he was getting death, because his trial came up first. The other two young men, one of them was an adult. They were brothers, and the other one was younger. He was below legal age. They just give him 5 years, again, because he came from a wealthy family. So at least the judge said, look, I can't send one out of the three to death and let the other one walk in 5.
Well, yeah.
So he took the death sentence off the table. but he still got life in prison. Unfortunately, no Christian came to encourage Clyde. They sent him to Retrieve Farm near Angleton on the Gulf Coast, a place so miserable that the inmates referred to it as the burning hell. There were no worship services there. In fact, they worked them as much as 8 weeks straight without a Sunday off. And I always thought that they had to give them one day of worship, if by their choice, whatever that worship is. And again, we're talking back in the
Yeah,
30s.
there were probably no rules.
Probably no rules, just like we've talked about in previous shows. But there was no time even to wash their socks. I mean, they kept them busy all the time, so they stayed dirty, you know. They would just come in from working the land, collapse exhausted into bed, filthy, to do it all over again the next day. Clyde lost what little faith he had, and I can understand that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just in everyday life, not prison life, just everyday life, when you're just doing the same thing over and over, getting up, going to work, coming home, eating dinner, going to bed, getting up, then just repetitive over and over
Well,
again.
yeah, wouldn't at some point he would probably say, okay, wouldn't it have been easier if I'd kept the death sentence?
Exactly.
You
And
know?
this is the rest of his life. He has
Yeah.
a life sentence, at this point. So he's like, man, this is too much.
Yeah.
So, how could both God and a place like that exist? His daddy came to visit him, and Clyde gave him back the Bible he had given him on death row. And I'm sure this devastated his dad,
Yeah.
because they had raised him in church. Now, the Bible does say that you raise your children in church. If they turn away from God, they always come back.
Yep.
And and I'm sure at this point his dad is praying, for God to be faithful in his word, especially if he's a preacher. He knows the word of God, and he's probably questioning at this point his own faith about his son. So he told him he didn't believe it anymore. Clyde told his dad, he said, I don't believe this anymore, and I'm not even going to try to live it because it's not true, and this is how Clyde felt. So, how that must have hurt his father, I'm sure he was devastated. The whole ordeal probably put him in an early grave. He died in 1938 at only 53 years old.
Young.
And, he probably carried that hurt and that stress, and his son's in prison and he knows it's not easy for him. He's probably worried he's going to get beat up. He's going to live a hard life. And his father always felt guilty about his son not getting the education that he needed. He felt like it was his fault, that his son wasn't able to, do better with his life. So during this dark period, Clyde became a desperate man. His fellow inmates tagged him as the meanest man in Texas. He attempted to escape 4 separate occasions, but was always plotting and planning it. He felt determined either way to get away or to be killed. He had 2 knife fights with fellow inmates and killed the men. For those crimes, he was sentenced to another life sentence in each case. So now he's got 3 life sentences.
Yeah.
And he doesn't give a crap. He's like, good, just kill me now, right? Like, if I do this enough times, you're just going to finally end it. You're either going to put me on death row or you're going to shoot me dead. Because he has nothing to
Well,
lose
yeah,
at this
what
point.
difference does it make now?
Yeah, and he doesn't believe in God, so he absolutely has nothing to live for. The officials realized he was not afraid to die, so they transferred him to a unit they called Little Alcatraz at Eastham Farm. There he plotted with several inmates to seize the arsenal and hand out weapons, planning to kill anyone in their way planning to kill anyone in the way of their escape. They seized 2 guards, used them as human shields, and made their way to the armory. But it was an ambush. Clyde was shot through the shoulder. The other 3 men who went up with him were killed. At that point, the prison system gave up on Clyde. There was an old abandoned morgue between death row and a concrete building. They put a steel door on it and they placed Clyde there in solitary confinement.
Wow.
Now, mind you, this is in Huntsville, Texas, which is East Texas. The humidity in the summertime is brutal, to say the least. Even with an air conditioner, it is so humid that sometimes that doesn't even matter.
Well, let's just say Houston's not, or Huntsville's not very far from Houston, and we can
Mm-mm.
feel the humidity today inside the house.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And on top of that, you know, they don't care that he's miserable. As a matter of fact, they want him to be miserable. Can you imagine putting a steel door? There's no breathing, you know.
No,
And so it's not only is he in a hot area that's
no
humid,
air
but that steel
circulation.
door, yeah, no air circulation. That steel door is radiating heat on top of that.
Mhm.
So there was no light except what came through the barred hole in the door for 5 hours a day. There was no water. There was no toilet. They didn't give him utensils because they were afraid that he would sharpen even a spoon to kill himself. They gave him no clothes except shorts, afraid he would hang himself. Clyde walked end to end in it to the point that he wore holes in the concrete floor where he made the turn, and his bare feet became hard as rocks.
Mm.
And that was probably anxiety more than anything. So after a few months, he asked the guards if they would bring him a Bible. He knew they wouldn't let him have anything else to read, but he had to have something to keep him from going mad. He was angry with God, so he set out to prove it was full of contradictions. With nothing else to do, he studied diligently. And there in the pig pen, Clyde Thompson came to himself. He began to realize the Bible was true and he was false. He repented in tears on his knees day and night for months. He read the scriptures and prayed, asking if God could really forgive someone like him and if he would take him and use him for his honor and glory. And the Lord, merciful, gracious, loving Father that he is, did just that. When they took him out to bathe and shave him once a week, they started letting him pass out literature. Soon he had 3 men wanting to follow the gospel. He wrote to a preacher in Dallas to come down and baptize him, and he did, and in an old deep bathtub on the corridor of death row where Clyde had once awaited execution.
Wow,
So
that's
the
awesome.
first time he was baptized because he was awaiting death row,
Mm-hmm.
awaiting execution. And that was just, I think, his way of making peace for his father, really. The second time he asked to be baptized because he truly repented of what he had done. And I think that this was actually a way for him to prove that he was actually sorry for what he did. In 1946, a young woman named Julia sent him a Christmas card after hearing his story from her minister. He had encouraged members of the church to send Clyde cards, and she was the only one who responded. A correspondence began, and they met for the first time a year later. Clyde proposed marriage, and she accepted. From then on, she campaigned on his behalf. Thompson was eligible for parole for the first time in 1949 and was routinely denied. He
Now,
was
how old is he at this point?
At this point, he was born in 1911.
11.
It's 49.
So 38.
Yeah, he's getting close to 40 years old at this point.
Yeah.
You know, his whole career is being a prisoner at this point. That's the only thing he knows.
Yeah.
He's been in there longer than he was out,
Well, yeah.
you know. He was upgraded in status in early 1951 when he was removed from close confinement and sent to the Ramsey Farm in Rocheron, Brazoria County, Texas. He was again refused parole later that year in 1953. Despite these rejections, Julia continued her letter writing, campaigning to state and prison officials. I think she's probably in her 30s at this point. She had never been married. She wasn't a big dater. She didn't, it wasn't like she was out on the town dating a lot of men. She was waiting for the right one. And if my daughter started writing a guy in prison that had been on death row, I'd be like, what are you doing? But I
Yeah, it'd
think
be
that
time for a talk.
it was a big talk.
Big talk.
We'd be having a big talk.
Lock her up.
But I don't think that anything anyone would have said to Julia would have stopped her from doing what she was doing. As a matter of fact, I think that she was convicted to do what she was doing for Clyde. And it makes you think sometimes people do some really crazy things. You're like, why are you doing that? It makes no sense. On paper, in black and white, what she's doing is insane. but I think that she was convicted by God to do what she's doing. I truly think that God sent her and put her in Clyde's life for a specific reason. So finally, on November 1st, 1955, after more than 28 years in prison, Clyde Thompson, once the meanest man in Texas, Thompson was finally awarded parole and released from prison on November 1st, 1955. He and Julia married 5 days later.
Wow.
So she worked
So
really
hard.
hard. And I wonder, I know she had obviously faith in God and she loved him, and obviously she had some faith in him that he was a good man. But once the door opened, once the bars opened to free him, I just wonder if Julia ever thought, I wonder if you're as good as you say you are.
Yeah.
Because that would just be human, right? I know I would be like, okay, now it's real. Now I have to live with this man. And I've helped set him free. So let's hope that you're telling the truth. I don't know. That would be scary to
I don't
me.
know. She was married in 5 days.
Yeah.
She was ready to go.
He was ready. And obviously, there was a calling there. So the Thompsons traveled for a while after their marriage, seeking to serve Christ wherever they were called. He was in local church work at times, as well as superintendent of a Navajo children's home in New Mexico. They adopted a Navajo infant girl there, which I thought was really sweet.
I do too.
Because at this point, they're really up in age and too old for her to become pregnant with their own child. But I'm sure they wanted, to have children together, so they adopted. Finally, in 1970, he returned to Huntsville, where he established his Prisoners' Aid Center. He taught and baptized more than 1,500 prisoners between then and 1977.
That's amazing.
Isn't that amazing? Because let's be honest, if he had not truly accepted Christ into his life and truly believed the word of God, the minute that he was released from prison, he'd have just went off and done his own thing. He would not have preached the word of God. He wouldn't have gone back to the prison system. He'd have been done. Who knows? He might have went back to the life of crime if he had not truly accepted Christ as his Lord and Savior. But Clyde, he was truly redeemed. And I think that he was so grateful that God is a merciful God and gave him a second chance. And God brought him Julia, so they worked together. And I thought that was really beautiful. Then they moved to Lubbock, Texas, where he worked with Sunset Church of Christ as a prison minister and converted another 400 souls. Clyde Thompson died of a heart attack on July 1st, 1979. In the words of Clyde Thompson, quote, "I think that my life is a testimony to the fact that a person who has committed murder can be saved. I committed murder, and there are a lot of people saved in this world today because I have lived in it, even though there are 8 dead because of me. I thank God that he used me for his cause, but I don't thank God for sin. I thank God that he brought me to the sense of understanding that I couldn't save myself, and the only hope was his mercy through Jesus Christ," unquote. And I just, I just think it's a beautiful story. Unfortunately, people had to lose their lives. But with that being said, that's the saddest part of it, is Clyde worked diligently through the rest of his life to bring as many people to God as he could. And I think that in his mind, he was trying to redeem what he had done.
Right, I do too.
By taking 8 lives, although that can never be changed, ever. And that's horrific. But he did the best he could with the blessings that God had given him, that a lot of people don't get that chance. And he proved himself. And so I just think that it's a good story and a learning lesson that no matter how horrible people live their lives, they can change through their faith. And I think that Clyde Thompson and Julia both did their best to make a really bad situation and took it and glorified God in that story. We always bring the true crime stories to you, with victims and things like that. And every once in a while, there needs to be a story that shows the light at the end of the tunnel, for people who truly, truly want to change, but through God.
Yeah.
And so anyway, just wanted to share that with you. But guys, let us know what you think. But until the next time, please remember to see the good and stay in perfectly perfect.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.